Good afternoon and welcome back. You're watching the Midday Report and I'm your host, Claudia Czerwińska. The Lithuanian government announced on Tuesday that it had introduced a nationwide state of emergency due to violations of its airspace by smuggling balloons launched from Belarus. The measures were made public on Friday by Prime Minister Inga Ruginienė. Lithuania's Interior Ministry said that this year alone there have been around 600 recorded cases of violations of its airspace by smuggling balloons from Belarus and 197 by drones. Vilnius airport was closed several times in October and November due to the balloons. The most recent incident occurred last Saturday evening. Airport closures due to balloons have so far affected more than 320 flights and more than 45,000 passengers. Lithuanian authorities said that the balloons are being sent from Belarus by cigarette smugglers, and the Belarusian authorities are to blame for this by failing to stop the activity. The Lithuanian government considers these incidents hybrid attacks. And to understand better what this state of emergency means, we are connecting live with our guest, Justinas Linkevičius, a researcher from the Institute of International Relations and Political Science at Vilnius University. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. We've heard about the state of emergency taking effect in Lithuania, but what does this state of emergency actually mean in terms of the mechanisms that are being introduced?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So the main argument that the government is suggesting that the state of emergency is important and needed to enable different authorities, especially in cooperation with the military, to continue checking different movements around the border. And also there is an understanding that these balloons and cigarettes coming with these balloons, they are not only flying through, somebody is receiving them on the ground in Lithuania. So to understand better the decision, I would say that the reason is just to be more prepared or enable different authorities to trace and track those that are potentially involved in this smuggling scheme.
So giving tools to different bodies, different Lithuanian bodies, to be able to enforce certain rules. What powers does this state of emergency give the government and military to tackle the problem? Do we have specifics?
It is not publicly announced, and there are 2 points of communication that the government is suggesting. One is that citizens will not be affected, and the need to have the full country covered by the state of emergency means that these balloons, they are flying not only in Vilnius or in Kaunas, but some of them have been caught in other places around the country. And it seems that the military police is involved. Also, there are also some tests going on how to neutralize these balloons. The military is also involved in tracking them using military radars as well. So I think that the state of emergency just enables, if I can put it, the civil authorities and then the military to cooperate more and be more involved in this. But again, this is suggested or explained in a limited detail, because probably this is also a part of the strategy that is not fully explained to the public.
Do we know if the Lithuanian citizens are actually going to be affected in any way, shape or form? You mentioned that there aren't many details, but I wonder how is that going to look for people living in the country?
So the government says that, again, they will not be affected. I assume that some additional checking may happen trying to cross the border or trying to move to Belarus, but of course, I think for now the restrictions are already there. But I don't think that some additional checks or restrictions will be within the country.
Depending on different countries and different jurisdictions, there are different ways of what the state of emergency could actually entail. We've heard from Lithuanian officials who claimed that in case of further violations, there is going to be the state of emergency, which is going to be upped even more. What would have to happen for Lithuania now to go even further and introduce even further controls and mechanisms to secure the country?
That's a very good question because I think we don't hear many details related to that because at some point I think especially when these balloons started and there were these first shutdowns of the airport, so the communication was that this is the smuggling. And I think when it became so frequent and the amounts of balloons have increased as well, so now we hear that this is the hybrid attack, and the key argument of the state of emergency is also suggesting that because of the hybrid attack. And the question is, of course, how the government measures this, and then what other elements need to be there, as you say, to lift it up. A clear plan is not announced, at least. I think for now it's everything is focused on this safety of the airports, and again trying to track those that are receiving those packages of cigarettes on the ground.
Thank you very much, Justinas Linkevičius, researcher of the Institute of International Relations and Political Science from Vilnius University, was my guest. Thank you, sir, for joining me on the program.
Thank you.
And we move on. Another major step in the peace negotiations is fast approaching, as after meeting with leaders of the UK, France and Germany in London on Monday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Kyiv will soon present a revised peace plan to the U.S. administration.
As Ukraine peace talks intensify, European leaders hastily arranged a meeting with President Zelenskyy to bolster Ukraine's negotiating position. After the meeting, Zelenskyy said that Ukraine and its European partners are close to finalizing a revised peace plan, and that the question of trading territory for security guarantees is not on the table for Kyiv.
Are we considering giving up any territory? We have no legal right to do so. According to Ukrainian law, our constitution and international law, we have no moral right to do so either.
The message from Europe's biggest powers is simple. Any ceasefire must be just and lasting, and Kyiv should not be pressured to accept a deal that could weaken its sovereignty or long-term security.
And I think we have a lot of cards in our hands. The financing and the furniture of equipment and training programs to Ukraine, the fact that Ukraine is resisting in this war, and the fact that the Russian economy is starting to suffer.
Over in Ukraine, the hope is that Europe can help to achieve a fair solution to the conflict. Speaking to TVP World, one of Ukraine's most high-profile wartime charity volunteers, Serhiy Pritula, stressed that Ukrainians see the war as an existential battle rather than a dispute over borders.
Nobody in Ukraine cannot imagine that we can capitulate, and that's why our president, I hope, will fight around every point. Doesn't matter, 28, 19, 10 or 5. But it's about the dignity of a nation, it's about the dignity of the state, and it's about the surviving of all Ukrainians.
Ukrainian officials seem to share this view. That's why they've described the talks with Americans as difficult. The approach of the Trump administration has recently come under fire in Europe.
They simply got on the wrong foot for the last 10 days. First, they started with this mal-thought 28 points plan. Then they finished with their national security agenda that is effectively not a security agenda but anti-European slur, and Europeans try to find their ways around it.
Donald Trump has called resolving the Ukraine war his administration's toughest foreign policy challenge.
The Czech Republic has a new prime minister today after President Petr Pavel formally accepted Andrej Babiš, the winner of October's parliamentary elections, as the country's head of government. Babiš, who is governing with the far-right SPD and the anti-environmentalist party the Moderates, is expected to cut support for Ukraine, reject EU pacts on migration and the environment, and forge closer ties with the Visegrad countries of Central Europe, particularly Hungary and Slovakia. Let's now connect live with our correspondent in Prague, Andrew Sweeney. Andrew, thank you for joining us. So given Babiš's Euroscepticism and anti-Ukraine policies, does Central Europe have another Viktor Orban in the making?
Well, that's certainly the concern of the protesters behind me here at Prague Castle. There's several hundred of them, mainly students, who are particularly really concerned about the anti-environmentalism that is likely to be part of this new government's programme, spurred by the motorists, who during the election campaign said that he wanted to even go as far is ban bicycle lanes. The new government is also certainly going to be quite anti-Ukraine compared to the previous administration, cutting supplies to the country from the state and only allowing private initiatives to fund the Ukrainian military. As you mentioned as well, the migration pact policy is also under threat here. The government has been adamant that no one supports it. However, unlike Orban and Prime Minister Slovakia Fico, who are particularly ideological in their views, Babiš is a businessman. He is considered to be very pragmatic. So while there will be, you might say, some populist measures coming as part of this new administration, it's likely that it won't be quite as controversial as the other members of the Visegrad Forum. Back to you.
Thank you so much. That was Andrew Sweeney reporting live from Prague. Google is facing a significant problem in Europe. The European Commission has launched an antitrust investigation against the American giant to clarify whether it is abusing its position by imposing unfair terms on publishers and content creators. Google is suspected of using third-party content to train artificial intelligence. The EC previously imposed a fine on Elon Musk's platform X. We now move to Brussels, where our correspondent Alex Cadier is standing by. Hello, Alex. So what exactly do we know about this case and what are the reactions so far? I mean, as a reminder, Musk's fine sparked a war of words between the US and Europe. What are we going to see now?
Yeah, good afternoon, Claudia. No such fireworks quite yet on this relatively new information that the European Commission is opening this investigation into Google. Now, why? Let's start with that. There is a suspicion from the European Commission that Google is using the content of web publishers. Now, that's quite a vague term, but that could include news websites and other sources of information, using that content to teach its AI, to feed information and data to its AI, without properly remunerating those online publishers. Now, that may seem a little bit theoretical, a little bit high level, but it does mean that information published by news sources and other sources of information is being used to feed and train Google's AI, but those who have created the information are not being paid for it. That will be a big crux of this investigation. That, of course, is the detail, but you rightly mentioned it. There is a growing tension between the European authorities and European legislation trying to regulate big tech. In many ways, the only legislation of its kind. More of a quiet, behind-the-scenes negotiation approach from Google. We saw that from then a few months ago, back in September. They were fined 3 billion euros for abusing their dominance in online advertising. They do not take the approach of Elon Musk, which is to go and insult European commissioners on Twitter or threaten retaliation against individual European politicians. Google much more taking the approach of negotiating with lobbyists behind the scene. Now, they are going to push back on these investigations, on these 3 billion euro fines, but it continues in this trend, as we've seen US officials very frustrated with the EU, including JD Vance, Marco Rubio, criticizing fines against X. Now, a new investigation is launched into Google. It will, however, take months to see if a fine comes out at the end of it. Claudia.
Thank you, Alex. That was Alex Cadier reporting live from Brussels. Poland's first nuclear power plant has received the green light from Brussels. Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced at a cabinet meeting that the European Commission has approved state aid for its construction. This decision paves the way for work on the plant to start. As he said, construction will be able to begin in earnest this December.
In a moment, we will receive official confirmation that the European Commission will approve public aid for the construction of the Polish nuclear power plant. This sounds technical, but the bottom line is that Poland can move forward with the construction process starting this year, in December.
And we remain in Poland. The Polish economy is picking up speed, growing by 3.8% in the third quarter, with good prospects for 2026. Good forecasts aside, there's unease among experts about whether this momentum can be kept up 5 or even 10 years from now.
As the value of Poland's economic output crosses the $1 billion mark, the country contemplates a way forward. There is a growing awareness that the current engines of growth won't be enough to propel the country forward.
We are nearing a glass ceiling. We can still approach the EU average over the next 10 years, but if we don't change our development model, we won't move forward.
According to a new report launched by the Polish Development Bank and the Polish Economic Institute, one of the biggest obstacles to securing Poland's future growth is not enough high-risk investments.
Poland needs not just organic investment, but investments in high-growth companies, tech companies that will quickly push into new markets and bring revenue back to Poland.
Experts say there is enough cash lying around in the country, around 350 billion euros in bank accounts alone, but Poles play it too safe when it comes to money.
We need to find a way to convince people that in the medium or long term they can make money by investing in more than just real estate or bank deposits.
This plays into Poland's other Achilles heel, which is institutional investment. The country's private equity funds last year invested an equivalent of 0.15% of Poland's GDP, less than a third of the EU average. And it's even worse when it comes to venture capital, which is nearly 8 times bigger in Europe on average. In the meantime, the state is plugging the gaps, meaning that institutions like the Polish Development Bank step in and act as co-investors to spread out risk and, in doing so, encourage private investors.
We mobilize private capital by providing the first or the last euro needed to close a deal, but the money stays in Poland.
The state also invests in high-tech enterprises, including the satellite maker ICEYE and drone manufacturer WB Electronics. But to secure growth, Poland will need more companies like these.
A major change is coming to Australia this Wednesday as the country is set to see social media platforms starting to deactivate the accounts of people under 16. This is the first regulation of its kind in the world. The new regulations will affect hundreds of thousands of teenagers. Europe is observing this idea with interest, and individual countries have their own ideas on how to deal with the problem of children's social media addiction.
This is the last day of social media in Australia, at least for kids under the age of 16.
I'm going to miss phone calls, going to miss talking to my friends.
But the parents see the issue differently.
He's generally quick to put down his dinner to rush back off, so he's not completing a full meal. A lot of the mornings he's going without breakfast to school.
Overexposure to social media can negatively affect various areas of children's lives. Apart from the ban for under 16s, Australia is also utilizing facilities such as gaming disorder clinics to tackle the devolving issue.
Were isolated at the home. They had become very much reclusive. Some of them had assaulted their parents when limits were posed.
Those who've been through the program finally see some hope for the future.
I was very afraid to socialise in the real world. I think the social media ban is a small step in the right direction.
In Europe, different countries aim to tackle the issue in their own ways.
I've told my kids that they can get a smartphone when they are 14, so we totally agree with that. And they don't have access to social media.
I believe that banning social media for minors under the age of 16 or 18 is not necessarily a good thing, because later on, mastery of these social networks can be an asset in professional and personal life. On the other hand, based on what I've seen, I am convinced that the problem of young people's overexposure to screens is a real tragedy, and that it is obviously necessary to legislate to limit this exposure.
The UK introduced the Online Safety Act, regulating standards for social media platforms. In France, a parental consent is needed for under 15s to create accounts. Denmark aims to block under 15s from using social media at all. In Poland, the issue is a subject of heated debates, but no decisions have been made yet.
What connects dire wolves, fungi bands, and robot surfing the deep? Well, all of these are science's latest innovations that came to be in 2025. Here's a little breakdown of some of the most significant projects from the world of science.
These white, fluffy snowballs are dire wolves, a species that has been extinct for over 10,000 years. A U.S. biotechnology company claims to have resurrected the prehistoric mammal by modifying the genome of a modern-day gray wolf using dire wolf DNA found in fossils. And this is only one example of what science has achieved over the past year. Let's take a look. You hear that? That's right, you're listening to fungi. Members of the band Bionic and the Wires plug mushrooms and plants into sensors which translate their electrical language into musical notes. Yes, plants can make music if you know how to listen to them. And yes, another furry creature, but this one is a species of the future. It's a pet companion called Moflin, powered by emotional AI.
So Moflin is all about non-verbal communication. It has an inbuilt emotional map, and it responds to light, to sound, and to touch. Over time, it can grow a bond with its owner based on the way that you interact with it.
And speaking of species of the future, China has a new international competition, World Humanoid Robot Games, a 3-day-long competition featuring teams from countries including the United States, Germany, Brazil, with 192 representing universities and 88 private enterprises. Look at what these robots can do. The stakes are high. Finally, best for last.
We have found evidence for possible biological activity on an exoplanet.
Scientists using the James Webb Space Telescope have found the strongest evidence so far that there might be life on a planet outside our solar system. They detected gases in the planet's atmosphere that on Earth are only made by living things. If confirmed, this could be the first real sign of life beyond Earth and guide future missions to study similar planets more closely. So there you have it, a sneak peek into what the world of science has been up to in 2025.
What a time to be alive. This would be all here at the Midday Report. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you back here on TV Pro for more news and features in just a moment.